All right, how's everybody doing? Wrapping up on the code kitchen, finishing up your projects, because it's time to move on to the next round. It's time for our Cradle to Career Pathways to Success in Technology. We've got a really amazing panel we're excited about. I'm not going to take any more of your time. Shaka is going to run this show, and big thanks to him for putting it together. Shaka Armstrong. Woo!
Thank you, Aaron. So at this time, I invite our panelists to join me on stage here. You can grab a chair, whichever chair suits your fancy, any of the chairs. So thank you for coming out to our coding event today, to the DC Code Kitchen. Part of having this instruction, part of doing this is we also want to be able to discuss some of the things that you're going to experience, and whether you're a student or whether you're advanced, trying to get into the business, trying to get into coding, trying to not even maybe get into the business, but be a business owner, start your own business. I always encourage people to look at entrepreneurship, at starting their own business, because it may be something very fulfilling for you. You may not be somebody who wants to necessarily be employed by somebody, but employ other people. So we definitely want to look at it from all angles. And so our panel today is titled Cradle to Career, Pathways to Success in Tech. We firmly believe at IDEAA that it's important to get people coding, to get people thinking about coding or the logic of computer science at the earliest ages possible, at the earliest stages possible. So that's our focus, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, is getting young people involved in coding, what that involves, what that takes, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about if you're out of school already and you're interested in getting into coding, kind of what some of that entails, what some of that involves. And so we have panelists who can speak to all these various areas. Beginning, let's see, where do we have? Okay, Michael Beach, our first, the gentleman all the way to my left, to your right. Michael Beach joins us from Targeted Victory. Targeted Victory, he's the co-founder there, is an audience-driven technology company focusing on programmatic media buying across all screens, employing over 100+ people. Targeted Victory's mission is to use technology to bring transparency and accessibility to media buying to empower its clients. His experience includes the strategy, development, and placement of more than $150 million in online advertising campaigns. In 2012, Michael was featured on PBS Frontline special, The Digital Campaign. Michael's also a frequent contributor to Mashable, Ad Age, The Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, Media Post, and more. So let's give a welcome for Michael Beach. Thank you for joining us. Seated to his right is Maya Garcia. Maya Garcia is the Director of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics for the Office of the State Superintendent of Education of the District of Columbia. Okay. And she leads the work around NGSS implementation and STEM programming, partnering with community stakeholders in over 200 schools in the District of Columbia to improve outcomes for students in STEM. At OSSE, Maya works to improve agency capacity to plan and execute high-quality STEM programming across PK to post-secondary programs. OSSE's focus areas include early literacy, career, and technical education, STEM teacher pathways, extended day, and OST STEM learning and environmental literacy. She served as a middle school science teacher in the district for 8 years prior to joining OSSE. During her time as an educator, Ms. Garcia served as a master teacher for Carnegie Academy for Science Education and Center for Inspired Teaching, president of the DC Science Teachers Association, and was awarded a Fulbright Distinguished Teaching Fellowship in South Africa. Most recently, Maya served on the Committee on Successful Out-of-School STEM Learning for the National Research Council and leads the planning and coordination for the DC STEM Network in partnership with Carnegie Institution of Washington. Let's give a hand for Maya Garcia. Thank you for joining us today. And to Maya's right is Nobel Ackerson. He's worked for 5 years with businesses bringing consumer and enterprise software for head-mounted displays to market. For any of you who don't know, or may not know, for maybe some of our younger students, Google Glass, some of these types of VR or AR type technologies, that's what we're talking about when we talk head-mounted displays. I know we can get broader, but just to give you an idea. He's also spent 5 years as a research strategist for health and fitness-focused solutions with emerging wearable and connected fitness systems, is an international speaker specializing in wearable technologies, a startup and enterprise advisor providing product and go-to market strategy for emerging platforms. He also founded FitLinks, which was recognized by the Washington Post as the most innovative startup, a certified advisor for the Udacity Tech Entrepreneur Program, and father to a lovely 20-month-old. Ladies and gentlemen, Nobel Ackerson, thank you for joining us today. And to his right, we also are joined by Christopher Lewis. He's the school board vice chair for Alexandria City Public Schools District C. Besides being a member of the ACPS School Board, Chris is currently employed at Public Knowledge, a public interest advocacy nonprofit that focuses on broadband, intellectual property, and technology policy. At PK, he serves as the Vice President for Governmental Affairs, where he leads their lobbying and political strategy. Prior to Public Knowledge, Chris worked at the Federal Communications Commission and is a former Senate staffer with the late Senator Edward M. Kennedy and the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Thank you for joining us, Chris, as well. And last but definitely not least, and part of the reason why we're here, and to a great degree, the motivation for much of what we do, I'd like to introduce you to this young man, Daquan Henderson, who joined us for the first time last year. It was a cold, rainy morning, and Daquan Henderson showed up at 6:30 a.m. First one here, before everybody. We didn't even open the doors till 7:30. But this young man here was so hungry for the knowledge and information and the opportunities that learning to code and program provides that he was up before the worm. And so Daquan won the challenge that day, coming in with a little bit of programming skill, a little bit of programming exposure, and has gone on to actually, with some partners, creating an app that helps, how did you put it?
Word education is to help students with disabilities.
The purpose of the app is to help students with disabilities. And I asked Daquan when we were out there during lunch, I said, why did you create an app to help students with disabilities? And he said, well, I know some of the teachers who teach the children with disabilities, and I was walking by their class, and I thought it would be a good thing to do. I'm like, well, all right, that's awesome. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Daquan Henderson to our panel as well. All righty, so let me get to our questions here and the reason why we're here having this panel discussion. And so question number one, so let's go with the cliche to start this all off. It's been said that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. So if you had to tell a young person what the first step that they should embark on, what first step they should take to getting into coding, programming, development, entrepreneurship, any of those areas, what would it be? And let's go ahead and start at the end with Michael. What would you tell somebody the first step it would be?
Yeah, the first step would be just believing in yourself that you can do it. And I think that that's the ultimate thing. And the second step is just really figuring out what you need to learn and realizing that the resources are there pretty much today to learn anything that you want, which was not available to people 10 or 20 years ago. And I think that, but the first step is just believing in yourself that you can do it.
I would say, let's ask the new dad. No, I'm just kidding. I would say probably ask as many questions as possible and be persistent about your questions. And then also, in that process, I would say, own where you're at in your curiosity. Meaning when you ask those questions, don't negate or don't think that you can't approach somebody. Approach everybody, because you never know what someone's going to have to tell you in return and how they're going to contribute to your path. So.
I'd build on what we've just heard and add, understand the problem. And by doing that, you have to be passionate enough about what you want to solve, right? So the problem that you want to solve. And understand that you may not be the only person that might have that problem. If it's an app, if it's a physical product, if it's even, a store or service that you're offering. Being passionate enough about it opens up an avenue for you to understand the problem through and through. So that's, in my opinion, the first step. Once you've sort of had a good grasp of the problem, that sort of leads a path to finding the ultimate solution. And obviously, as I just mentioned, it's not just a problem that you're solving for yourself, it's for other people. So going to as many people as you can find with a similar problem set and expanding your passion and your knowledge with that cohort, you're able to thereby right before you even write a single line of code, you have passionate people like you who are waiting for that solution that you can involve in building your product. And as a result, on day one, when you launch, you would have 100 users that can't go a day without using your product.
All right.
I really like Nobel's answer. I think I would add to it, especially if you're thinking of a student, a young student, a teenager or a preteen. I think it's important that a student gets as much exposure to the world, the breadth of opportunities and things going on in the world out there, because I think of coding I'm not a coder. I think of the work that you do as problem solving, and you seem to describe it that way. That's why I liked your answer. And so I think the more experience you have in other things, the more you can understand different problems that are out there that need to be solved. You can understand different aspects of business, different sides of the business that you're getting into beyond just pure coding, and that's where the real entrepreneurship comes in. If you have crazy coding skills, yeah, you could probably go out and get a job. But if you want to be a real entrepreneur, you need to be able to think beyond just writing code.
I guess, well, for me, I know is that people should take in as much information as possible so they could understand what they're doing and what problem they're going to help solve. And for me, doing this project with my other partners, I learned so much about coding, and now I could tell people what I learned. And that's what it's all about.
All righty. So the next question, there's a new app service that I've come across. It was called Fresco. It allows citizen journalists, anybody with a cell phone camera, to share video that they've captured with news organizations and potentially get paid for the video they're sharing. This app or service, actually it's really both, is the product of a CEO who's only 21 years old. They have major deals in place with some major news organizations. So this thing is poised to really take off. Like I said, the CEO is 21 years old. He started coding iOS apps at the age of 13. The difference between him and some students is he had access to the tech he needed to be successful at that age, even attending Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference. So given that many youth may not have broadband at home, and their primary internet access may be via smartphone, What do you think under-resourced youths or people who may not have quite all that access, what do you think that they can do to acquire the skills they need to become today's coders and tomorrow's entrepreneurs in those circumstances? Let's start with, yeah.
So I think of it from two sides. Starting with actually, you mentioned I'm on the school board, but my day job at Public Knowledge, we're out there advocating for public policy that that opens up those sorts of opportunities. So the idea that 100 years ago, people felt like a telephone was essential for all homes to be connected to commerce, to jobs, to emergency services like 911 and so forth. That's true about broadband today. And so we, as a society, but also folks in the tech community, need to understand the decisions that are being made right now about policy that impacts opportunities for people. The Federal Communications Commission just expanded a subsidy that was meant to make sure that 99.9% of families had phones in their house, and expanded it to broadband subsidy for low-income families. That's huge. That almost didn't happen 2 weeks ago. I won't get into why it didn't happen, or why it almost didn't happen, but it almost didn't happen. And right now Congress is debating whether or not they cap how much money is available for that program. So there are every year policy decisions being made that impact the ability for everyone to have access to broadband, to software and hardware. At the local level, school divisions like Alexandria's, where I work on the board, we're trying to find every opportunity to provide those tools for our young people. So we give every student, this is pretty common in a lot of school divisions, the one-to-one device program where either everyone gets a laptop or everyone gets a tablet. But when they take it home, the broadband connectivity was a real problem. And so while we've been waiting for them to expand this subsidy, we've been loaning out MiFis to students just so that they could actually have connectivity at home. And we're trying to find ways to fund for every student to have connectivity through a MiFi. Just so that there's equality there and everyone has the same opportunities. So there are a lot of policy decisions being made that that people aren't aware of, and we need more people to be engaged and advocate for them.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are definitely ways to solve that across the spectrum. There's some policy things that have just been spoken of. There's some, corporate outreach solutions that are ongoing and need to be improved. There's some academic ones as well. But as Shaka mentioned before, I'm an advisor at Udacity's program. Since I sent you that note, I'm actually on the board now. And so I want to speak directly to the student on how to sort of hurdle some of the roadblocks that are just there to get a successful idea started. And that would be to be transparent with and open about what you are trying to do. The more you talk about an idea, as I said before, the more passionate people sort of crowd around that idea, assuming it's a good idea. And if it's a bad idea, believe it or not, you still get a lot of people who see that you as a young person or as a person from an economically or underdeveloped area is a little set apart because you have sort of thought through a problem and you are making efforts in order to resolve them. And that can only be achieved if you are sort of open and you're communicating about it directly to your professors or your neighbors or at the local library or anywhere you can sort of show off a sketch of something that you're trying to solve. The byproduct, if it is a good idea or a bad idea, is that you're more likely to find someone who's willing to help, mentor, advise. And that's what I do on a daily basis. And I see a lot of bad ideas that have nuggets of great ideas, and whether it's destined to be a flop or, Twitter was just a chat system that had been, around for years. They just took an average idea and solved a problem that a lot of people didn't know they had. So talking about it, reaching out, you'll notice people would want to help you.
Anybody else? Okay.
Yeah, I just definitely agree with everything the rest of the panel said, including access to broadband. One different twist I'd put on it is really the kind of the transformation that's going on in business, politics, and sports, which is really underdogs winning. And I think that what you're seeing is a really diminishing returns on traditional advantages that people have. It's why you're seeing upstart politicians upset people that have every advantage. You're seeing businesses that you think are going to be dominant for 50 years, a competitor pass them up in 5 years. You're seeing sports, teams with the lowest payroll winning championships. It's because they're not, the underdog is not relying on the fact that they don't have all of the advantages of the traditional power, and the traditional power is relying on those things and not changing. And you're seeing that really in those three areas. And I think that if you're coming out as an underdog, it's really finding the things that are going to have the biggest impact that you have access to, and really focusing on those, because your competition is not necessarily going to do that, and that is really having a rapid impact on those three sectors.
That's really good. Yep. Okay. Okay. Next question. Many of our youth may feel sometimes that the deck is stacked against them as they deal with some of the obstacles when it comes to technology. Maybe they have outdated equipment at home, and then they might read about some of the current crop of founders, and I think this actually speaks to what you were just talking about, Michael, who graduated or when their business dropped out from Ivy League schools, and maybe they may feel like there's no money for them to attend a Yale or a Harvard, which also again speaks to Udacity and what they're doing, but they may not feel like those options are available to them. So it might become easy to become discouraged in those situations, again, where maybe you're dealing with something outdated, outmoded. What advice would you give to somebody who maybe is who feels like they're working against technology or working against these potential obstacles?
All right, I'll take it. So my background, I lived in West Africa in an orphanage for 4 years, and I got to see what people without the means could do firsthand with the little that they had. They had nothing, and that was being generous, right? But if you notice, one thing that I mentioned before and it sort of goes to your point, without the resources and with the constraints set in place, and without the help, being hungry and willing and cunning sort of set a spark. And a lot of my colleagues, or a lot of the other kids in the village, were able to sort of see themselves out of those situations. We were just a little background. I was born in the UK, and I went to West Africa, Ghana, as part of a program, and lived with them. So that is one factor, but that alone can't sort of surface all boats, right? Like, you see a lot of people scrapping to get by, and you see a lot of talent go wasted because there's no support system for those. So taking that a step farther from a community standpoint, be it economic policy, be it corporate or educational, there's a lot being done to help, but a lot of that information isn't disseminated to the caretakers or the parents of those in poverty or those who don't have access to broadband, for example. So some of the good work that some of our panelists here are doing goes to sort of solve those problems, but there's still a lot of work to do. So being able to provide the value prop and the incentives to the parents and caretakers of some of these kids that have promise, that don't have the chance, is very important. An incentive meaning, you know, why should I take my kid out there? Why should I drive 5 miles out of the way? I don't have money for gas. What are you going to do for me? Those are the real questions that need to be answered in order for some of this stuff to go away. So again, there's a political policy needs to be in order. But if you look at Daquan as an inspiration here, you know, you're always going to see a nugget of hope. Like, you're going to always see the one person that just sort of broke out and said, you know what, nothing is being done for me, or not enough is being done for me. I want to sort of go out, broaden my horizon, sort of knock on the door at 6 a.m. just so that somebody notices. And as I've sort of the theme that I keep going with every answer is, you know, once you're out there, and we as a community out here need to sort of encourage the Daquan to the world to come out and be transparent.
I would say that Daquan is here. Daquan needs to bring a tribe with him, or maybe his tribe is here, right? Did you bring friends today?
But I did meet people.
Oh, see, there you go, you made friends. I think in the District of Columbia, where this is a really big issue, this issue of access and equitable access to technology and to courses that really seek to empower students and give them kind of a vision or the tools they need to engage in kind of this global community. We see the DC STEM network, which was mentioned earlier, as a way of uniting an ecosystem, or taking an ecosystem model and really working across silos. So that's me working with my colleagues across agencies on policy, and we're really trying to wipe down the barriers or eliminate the barriers between business and industry and the formal space and then the after school space, where all of us are really trying to do the same thing, but doing it in very different ways. And so, or doing the same thing, but not talking about it. And so we're spending our money maybe not in the best ways or not being as efficient. And somehow things are not trickling down. And that's that parent awareness piece, that's that parent engagement piece. And so with the network and with this ecosystems model, a lot of cities are trying to reach out and say, hey, we have free Wi-Fi almost everywhere in the District of Columbia, which is phenomenal and not the norm across the country. And how do we take that and engage our parents and families and let them know what they can do with that opportunity? Because that's not a barrier for us. But what is a barrier is, what do I then do next? And so really taking that and as a community, having the same message, a common goal, and really getting that and pushing that out through all the networks so it's really reaching and empowering our youth. And so that's the work we're trying to do, and I think that a lot of cities need to network in the same way so that we have a constant message and we're working together instead of in silos.
I think it's a combination of that and some of what we were talking about before. I went to Harvard. I saw folks who are now bigwig muckety mucks at Facebook or whatever, and but I also have friends who grew up here in Virginia with me. They were not wealthy. They went on and they are starting tech companies. And I think your point about I just feel like hustle is more important than where you're in school, and because I saw people at Harvard who did not hustle, and they are not the CEO of Facebook or whatever. So hustle is more important, and when you hustle and you have skills, there may be some barriers, but and it is on us in society to make it, recognize the barriers that are there for folks who may not have it easy or who may not, be in an elite university or something like that. But in the end, if you continue to hustle and you really got the skills, I think people will find you. And so that, the hustle, I think, can overcome. Sometimes, you need a little extra hustle to overcome, but that's okay. Because you're going to be that much better than the person who didn't have to work as hard as you did.
So at last year, 6:30 in the morning, what made you get up and want to come here when the sun was still down? Here, let's see. There we go.
What made me get up is, well, first off, I was in the STEM program for 2 years. Yeah. And it was nice. I liked it so much, and I wish I'm going to continue with STEM because it gives me a different perspective on how we do things in our world. And usually when a teacher tells kids about a program, 6 a.m., not most kids don't even want to wake up for school at 6 a.m. Most adults don't even want to wake up. So what made me get up is I like to try new things, and by me starting this company with my partners, I would gain knowledge. And when I showed up here, everyone was enthusiastic just as I was, and that is what drew my attention to being here. And for them calling me back this year to share my story is an amazing opportunity.
Thank you. All right. So for our students, and I'm just going to follow up on something we were talking about earlier. For our students and for people here who are out of school and maybe feel like they have that idea or they have the beginnings of that idea that could change the world, change their lives, what advice would you give to them to pursue that, to start a company? And I want to start with you, Michael, because you are the co-founder of Targeted Victory, and I've some friends who are CEOs, who are founders, and I know that being a founder, being a CEO, that's not an easy route to go. It's not an easy life. I was listening to a podcast recently where a gentleman was giving advice to somebody in a startup, and he basically kind of coldly told him, your business will probably fail. And that, just bluntly, that's what he said. Your business will probably fail, but as you talked about with hustle and heart and passion, you may see your business succeed. So for those out here who may have that idea, what would you tell them about becoming a founder, becoming an entrepreneur, starting a business?
Yeah, in his background, we started our company on February 1st, 2009, right as the kind of economy was melting down, so it wasn't the greatest probably launch date for a business. Our likelihood of success was probably a little bit lower than normal, but yeah, I think it is. It's probably the most rewarding experience because you're in, as much control as you can have on your day and kind of what direction you go. It's also very challenging because it is an uphill climb, and things are different because table stakes for just basic knowledge of an industry are so much higher now because of the availability of information. And I think this was brought up a couple of times earlier by the panel of just really digging in about the problem that you're trying to solve. Because what would have constituted due diligence 20 years ago versus today is totally different because there is so much information about virtually every industry, the financials, other players, who's raising money. I mean, there's access, information that's available to anybody. But I think that's a really big deal to identify. And then just knowing that, keep in perspective of where you want to end up, but what are the really small steps along the way, to get there. Because without that, if you just think you're going to land in the kind of pot of gold, you're most likely not going to succeed. And I think that it's, I talk to a lot of people now who are in working existing jobs and want to start a business. And the thing that's different again about today is I'm always telling them, keep your job at first, get a little bit of business knowledge, get some customers, you know, and then leave your job when you have an economically stable business, which again is something that you couldn't have done 10 or 20 years ago, that, you know, kind of, again, lowers the barrier to entry to starting.
And Noble, I'd like to pose the same question. When wearables really started coming to the fore, I know you jumped in and you have LinksFit that you did, that you
Right.
co-founded.
Right.
And so when you saw the opportunity with a new technology, what was it, how did you go about founding, getting that started? What was that like for you?
Not to sound like a broken record, I actually just wanted to build something really quick, which was actually my first mistake. So I actually will answer your question, because LinksFit was a success in some people's eyes because we had a successful exit, but it was a failure in most people's eyes because we actually never got to mass market, right? And my first mistake was, I know I have got this cool idea and I want to get it out. So what I did, I picked up a book, a program that I'd never written before, and just went to work. I built this fantastic fitness prototype that just used the sensors and the Google Glass thing. Actually, it wasn't even Google Glass at the time. It was just a Fitbit. And I sent it to somebody who happened to know somebody who happened to know somebody at Google, and they gave me a Google Glass. That's great, because for the next maybe 13 months, I spent a lot of time with Google validating the technology. And it was fantastic. Like me, just college dropout kid working with Google on a device that I couldn't even talk about. That was just one of the most fantastic experiences of my life. Why is it a mistake? One, because we were validating the technology and not the user, right? Not the people. So as been mentioned before, you have to sort of understand what the problem is. Will people actually use your product? And to give you a little bit more context, the fitness app that I built was a very useful one. It's actually used still today by rehab patients. However, it was at the time targeted towards people who go to the gym. You can just basically take your workout with you, and you can do your pull-up without having to reach for your phone. You'd hear a voice in your head or in the bone conduction speaker, and it'll tell you what to do if you're going too fast or you're going too slow. It's fantastic. The problem is nobody wants to show up at a gym with a face computer, right? Nobody wants to be that creepy guy with a camera on his face. So that's a huge problem. And the easy thing to resolve is, if you have, and I'll leave you with this, if you have a great idea and you're so passionate about it, stop. Don't write a line of code. Actually, don't even think about it any further. Go to people. Start talking about it. Go to people who can help you validate the idea from a business standpoint. Is it a good business? Go to technical people, people who have solved this problem before in a different light. See whether they can validate it from you from a technical standpoint. And if that's all good, now you've got your user validation, and that's the hard part, because they're going to shred your idea to pieces, right? They don't know how awesome your idea is, right? Because hopefully when you're validating with them and you're researching, you're not telling them that this is your idea, because then you have a biased opinion. What you want to do is to go to them and just sort of ask questions about the pains that they're having or the problems that they need solved within the bounds of what you're trying to resolve. And if all that aligns and the moons aligns with a little bit of luck, and you've defined the problem and you've decided, then you write a line of code, go back to those users, have them shredded to pieces, come back to the drawing board and do it again. Only after 3 or 4 times of that would you even want to launch. And it sounds very complicated, but there's a system for that. People call it sprints, people call it a prototype or lean methodology. There's so many ways to solve that problem. But don't just sort of jump into an idea. Talk to people about it, be transparent about it. The notion that I get is that, oh, if I tell someone my idea, they're going to run with it. Well, your idea is not that good. Frankly, most ideas, the really, really, really good ones, seem very stupid at first. Facebook may have sounded like a waste of time. Apex Labs, my former company that I just left, puts Vuzix and Google Glass and Epsons on the faces of manufacturers, car manufacturers and airline manufacturers, and they get to do things hands-on. And even today, we get the larger corporations like GE and GM saying, oh, this is just a toy. But that's how real big companies are started. It's always stupid at first, but your users actually determine your success. So talk to them.
All right. So when we're talking about diversity and pathways to success in tech, one of the things we hear sometimes is that there are some organizations that feel like inclusion, that making sure that everybody has a voice in a product or in launches or in new technology, that in order to ensure that everybody has a voice, that we have to somehow lower the bar, that we have to lower our standards to make sure that everybody can get in. And it's a refrain that we've heard for some time. How do we change the culture so that we have companies that are looking at, because we're global citizens, we're a global economy, but we're still not quite thinking that way in many of our tech firms. So how do we change that culture so that it is more inclusive? Because there are smart engineers, smart